Sounds change the sounds around them in words. The German ch, for instance, has two pronunciations, known as Ich-Laut and Ach-Laut, with a palatal fricative triggering after front vowels and a velar fricative triggering after back vowels, or a. It gets a little more complicated than that, but generally we have here a sound that is further back in the mouth being said after a sound that is also further back in the mouth, or a sound that's further forward after another sound that's further forward. This is an example of assimilation, where sounds affect each other to become more similar. The Ach-Laut, Ich-Laut example is specifically a form of carryover. You've already pronounced a vowel in one part of the mouth, it takes less effort to move the tongue less from the position it's already in. That's why this phenomenon is so boring. It's just laziness. What's more interesting is something like the difference between German as well, but let's take the English can and kin. Don't worry about the spelling, let's pretend they're both spelled with a K for simplicity's sake. The k in can is a velar plosive, while the k in kin is a post-palatal plosive. Because the vowel I is further forward in the mouth, the k before it also moves slightly too, becomes palatalized. And this is language specific. Scottish Gaelic, for instance, distinguishes plain and palatalized consonants, including k and k. So it's not like English speakers physiologically need to say k instead of k before I. No, they're saving as much effort as possible given the resources available to them. K isn't being used as a phoneme, so it's available for use as an allophone of k. Not just as carryover, but in anticipation of the next sound. This isn't just laziness anymore, it's clever laziness. Well, okay, you say. Don't get too excited, K. Klein. So English speakers process these two sounds as a single segment. We don't say k, n after all, we say kin. These sounds are right next to each other, it's easy for them to assimilate. But what about when sounds assimilate that aren't even next to each other? Vowel harmony is a form of assimilation, but it doesn't exclusively affect sounds that are next to each other, rather extending over a phonological unit, usually a word. For vowel harmony in its simplest form, we can look at a language like Kazan Tatar. See, Tatar has the following vowels, which form a balanced system with 5 front vowels and 5 corresponding back vowels. This backness feature refers to how far back in the mouth the tongue goes to pronounce a vowel. Native Tatar words are only allowed to contain all back vowels or all front vowels, so when an affix gets added to a word, it harmonizes with it. For instance, the plural suffix has a vowel that varies between a and er, so the plural of sakal is sakallar, but the plural of kerfek is kerfekler, maintaining the front-back vowel harmony. Some words, like the word for birthday, turankern, seem at first to break this rule, but should really be analysed as 2 separate segments strung together to form a compositum. Here, the vowel backness of the last word in the compositum decides the harmonic feature of any added suffixes. So really, Tatar is the least weird, least exception-ridden example of vowel harmony I could find, and even so, well, if you were really paying attention, maybe you caught the little caveat I already gave. And we'll get back to that in just a second. But first, I thought I should mention that though these are assimilatory processes, from what I've seen, speakers seem much more aware of them than of the examples I gave at the start of the video. The harmony tends to be represented in orthographies, for example, and is, remember, switching one phoneme for another, which is unlike the allophonic variation we saw earlier in English, where these assimilatory processes are so subtle that native speakers usually don't even know they're doing it. Along with other phonological particularities, they can be very difficult for language learners, and they're certainly not something you'll see in a textbook. As with many aspects of language, the best way to learn is often through exposure. And what better way to do this than through watching your favourite foreign language shows and films with this video's sponsor, LingoPie. LingoPie is partnered with dozens of media companies around the world to bring you an extensive catalogue of authentic shows and films, allowing you to immerse yourself in the culture of your target language, while actually hearing the way it's actually pronounced, what words are actually used, what grammar is essential, and what bits are usually ignored in the spoken language. If you're used to watching an episode of a show before going to bed, why not teach yourself Spanish while you're at it? You can use interactive subtitles, clicking on words you don't understand to get instant translations, or use double subtitles to see both your language and the target language simultaneously. Then consolidate your learning with game quizzes and personalized flashcards. Have fun and relax while learning languages with LingoPie. I've used it myself for Spanish, it's genuinely very good, so go to my dedicated link in the description and learn languages the fun way, with a 7-day free trial and 55% off a yearly plan at LingoPie. But back to that caveat, have you guessed what it is? That's right, the word native is doing a lot of heavy lifting when we say that native Tatar words have front-back vowel harmony. Kazan Tatar has plenty of loanwords from Arabic, Persian, and Russian which exhibit word-internal disharmony that would otherwise be impermissible in the language. Deciding what form to use for an added suffix then starts to get very complicated, and vowel harmony really only gets more frustrating from here. Recent literature on Tatar describes this one-dimensional vowel harmony, but older literature suggests two dimensions, with words harmonizing based on backness and roundedness. Roundedness here being essentially the lip shape you use to pronounce the vowel. This suggests either that Kazan Tatar very recently lost its roundedness vowel harmony, or that the previous data was bad and biased by the fact that this feature exists in other Turkic languages, such as Turkish. Turkish primarily has front-back harmony like Tatar, with a vowel inventory that looks like this. But for the high vowels, it makes a further distinction between rounded and unrounded harmony, meaning low vowel suffixes have two versions, one for front and one for back, such as with the plural suffix, which has forms lar and ler, whilst high vowel suffixes, like the genitive suffix, have four versions, front rounded, front unrounded, back rounded, and back unrounded. Once again, things get complicated with loan words, and with some consonants exhibiting harmony blocking properties, but the thing I want to focus in on here is this one Turkish suffix. The present tense marker, ior. This suffix is one of only 7 in the Turkish language that does not undergo vowel harmony. Well, the first vowel, the I, assimilates as usual, but the o always stays the same. Thus, we have istiyor, okuyor, alıyor, and görmüyor. Alright, let's take a step back here. Assimilation of vowels, even across consonants, probably occurs in most languages to some extent, because of the lingering effects of the pronunciation of one vowel carrying over for longer than we think. Perhaps over generations, in some languages, this carryover effect from the previous vowel is reinterpreted as an intentional part of the next vowel segment, and thus it is integrated into the word itself. So, does it have any purpose? Is there any functional reason that would cause this mutation, if you will, to stick around? Well, possibly. Firstly, you could argue that, like with our earlier assimilation examples, there is a slight laziness going on here. Sure, there are intervening consonants, but especially if they're assimilating slightly to the vowel too, it might save just a little bit of energy to have all the vowels be of a similar backness or roundedness. And secondly, it can signal a barrier between two segments. If we take a hypothetical language with front-back vowel harmony and say momo yimi, we can draw a clear segment boundary, typically a word boundary, between momo and yimi, because we know that o and I should never be appearing in the same segment together. Of course, two words of the same harmonic group could follow each other, so every new segment would not mean a switch of vowel group, but every switch of vowel group would mean a new segment, so it still helps overall on average. And empirical evidence supporting vowel harmony as a segment boundary marker has been found in Finnish. We'll go back to Finnish later. For now, let's return to the Turkish suffix yor, and find that it's not losing that much in terms of ease of pronunciation. See, any additional suffixes after yor assimilate with yor, not the root word. Like if you add the suffix im for the first person singular, it will assimilate into its back-rounded version, giving a form like görmüyorum, not görmüyorum. This all makes sense if you just say that that cutoff point, the border between one domain of vowel harmony and the next, doesn't fall at the end of the word in this case, but rather just before the yor ending, signaling it's being a different segment. But unfortunately, not all languages can be analysed just so neatly. The Senegambian Wolof language has a vowel harmony system based on tongue root position. Basically, not many, but a couple languages across the world distinguish vowels not just on the position of the body of the tongue, but also the position of the root of the tongue. Wolof contrasts vowels with and without an advanced tongue root, which we're going to call our ATR vowels and our non-ATR vowels. Looking at this inventory, do you see the issue? Whilst Tatar and Turkish had symmetrical vowel systems, every front vowel had a corresponding back vowel and vice versa, the Wolof vowels are not symmetrical. The long low vowel R only exists without ATR, and the high vowels, both long and short, can only exist with ATR. This creates gaps in our harmony system. Just like before, a root word is considered one of the two categories, either an ATR root or a non-ATR root, and suffixes added to that word have to agree in ATR value with the root. However, if the suffix is one of the asymmetrical vowels, then it becomes invariable, because it has no corresponding vowel to switch to. So far so good, I think. Now, if we're talking about saving energy, we want to switch between advanced tongue root and non-advanced tongue root as few times as possible over the course of a word. So the R vowel becomes opaque. Everything after it becomes non-ATR, like in the word yobuwale, where the first two vowels are ATR, but then we get R, which has no ATR equivalent, so it stays non-ATR, and then the final vowel also becomes non-ATR, assimilating with the R vowel. This breaks our segment boundary rule, but given the phonology Wolof has to work with here, it's maintaining the ease of pronunciation rule as well as it can. But within the same language, we have the I and U vowels acting in the exact opposite way. These vowels are transparent to vowel harmony, giving words like barigo and camisol Here, the third vowel is ignoring the preceding I entirely, jumping over it and assimilating with the first vowel instead. This makes no sense physiologically, because you're switching tongue root position twice instead of once, breaking our ease of pronunciation rule, but maintaining our segment boundary rule as well as possible, by switching back to the original ATR value of the word, signaling that it is still part of that word. The fact that these two opposite approaches exist within the same language suggests to me that vowel harmony is a very cognitive process. It's almost like Wolof keeps building a string until it hits the end of a word or an R vowel, then applies the ATR value based on the root vowel, but since E doesn't have a non-ATR equivalent, it just remains ATR, even though this is physiologically inefficient. In Wolof, when E or U occur in the middle of a word, they essentially act as neutral vowels, looked over in the vowel harmony system. Neutral vowels are quite common in languages with vowel harmony, also occurring, for instance, in Finnish. Finnish has these 8 vowels and exhibits backness harmony. Now, 2 of these vowels don't quite fit into the system, and as such are treated as neutral vowels. That's right, these ones. All the back vowels are harmonizing, forming their own class, then these 3 front vowels are harmonizing, and then E and A can occur freely with any of the other vowels or with each other. Now, why are these neutral? I don't know, don't ask me, it makes very little sense. If we look at a Forman chart of these vowels, we see that we get our 3 groups here, but the neutral vowels are not in between the front and back harmonizing vowels, but rather form one of the extreme groups. Yes, this lowered formant value here is caused by rounding, but still, from the listener's perspective, surely E and A should be having the strongest assimilatory effect upon the following vowels because of their formant values. And air isn't rounded, but still gets grouped with the rounded ones, and it doesn't make any sense. But maybe the original table I threw up here was a little bit misleading in how simplified it was. The best way to explain this is by looking at which back vowels are rounded. Like in Wolof, where the neutral vowels are the ones which don't have a corresponding vowel with the opposite ATR feature, the neutral vowels of Finnish appear to be the ones that don't have a corresponding vowel with the opposite backness feature. This suggests an insanely high level of subconscious abstraction of the vowel space. I don't really know how to feel about it. Skipping just across the sea to Finish's close relative, we see that North Estonian has completely lost its vowel harmony system. Among the Turkic languages, Uzbek has also lost its vowel harmony system. How and why such a system disappears could be a video in its own right, but what's also interesting is all the little oddities that such a system leaves behind after it's gone. For instance, here we could look at a strange little language called English. That's right, it was all a trick. It was another video about the development of the Germanic languages all along. A form of vowel harmony called I mutation has been very important for the development of the Germanic languages. What we've been looking at so far has been left to right or progressive harmony, with carryover effects from the root vowel. But I mutation is an example of right to left, or regressive harmony, where, for instance, a back vowel is changed into a front vowel equivalent in anticipation of an I vowel in the next syllable. In Old English, we see this mutation basically affect all the vowels it possibly could, with all back vowels being fronted when they stood in a syllable before I. And now, say if you have a word that takes a plural form with an I, like moose to moosi, well, in the plural form you're going to get I mutation, so it's going to become mysi. Unfortunately, that final syllable then got deleted in Old English for reasons beyond the scope of this video, so you get the plural mys. One great vowel shift later, you end up with the paradigm mouse, mice. So English speakers live with the effects of vowel harmony every day. It's there, in a way, whenever we speak of mice and men.